It was a Friday evening. The air in Montgomery felt heavy, thick with the kind of December humidity that sits on your shoulders like an invisible weight. I remember holding my purse close and thinking about dinner. I was tired, but not just the kind of tired that comes from working all day at the department store. It was a deeper exhaustion, one that had been building for years. The kind that seeps into your bones when you've spent a lifetime being told you're less than someone else. The sidewalks glowed under weak streetlights. The buses hissed and rumbled, their doors opening and closing like the jaws of something alive. I had taken that same bus line countless times before. Same route, same rules, same humiliation. I climbed aboard and paid my fare, 10 cents, dropping the coins into the slot. The driver looked up. I knew his face. James Blake. We'd crossed paths before. Years earlier, he'd thrown me off his bus when I refused to enter through the back door after paying up front. I had walked home that day in the rain, swearing I'd never ride one of his buses again. But that night, I had no choice. My feet hurt, my back ached, and home was still miles away. He didn't say a word as I boarded, and neither did I. Sometimes silence feels safer than speech. I found a seat in the colored section, just behind the white rows. The law said we had to sit in the back, but that night there were still a few empty seats in the middle. I sat beside a man and across from two other women, all of us worn out from the same kind of day. The bus filled slowly, the smell of diesel and perfume and sweat mixing into one tired scent. As we rolled down Cleveland Avenue, the bus began to fill. White passengers climbed aboard, and the rows in front of us filled first, just as always. But then, a white man got on, and there were no empty seats left. The driver turned his head, eyes scanning the rows, landing on us, the 4 black passengers sitting in the first row of the colored section. "Y'all better make it light on yourselves," he said. Those words. I'll never forget them. They weren't new. They were part of the air we breathed in Montgomery. But that night, they hit different. The man beside me shifted, murmured something under his breath, and stood. The 2 women across from me did the same. The bus grew quieter. All eyes were on me. My hands tightened around my purse. I remember thinking, if I move now, nothing will ever change. I wasn't trying to be brave. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was just so tired of giving in. I looked up at him, at that driver who had thrown me off his bus before, who looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe, and I said quietly, "No." He blinked. For a moment, I saw confusion cross his face, as if the word itself didn't belong to me. He said, louder this time, "If you don't stand up, I'm gonna have you arrested." And I answered, still calm, "You may do that." The bus went silent except for the hum of the engine. The white man still stood, awkwardly shifting his feet, unsure what to do. The driver glared at me, jaw tight, before stepping off to call the police. Time slowed. I could hear my own heartbeat, the distant chatter outside, the creak of the bus frame as people moved. Somebody whispered, "She's crazy." Another voice, soft but clear, "No, she's brave." I didn't feel brave. I felt like myself, small, tired, but certain that for once, I was standing up by sitting down. The officers arrived minutes later. 2 of them. Their boots clanged against the bus steps. They asked the driver what happened. He pointed to me like I was a problem that needed fixing. "Why don't you stand up?" one officer asked. "Why do you push us around?" I replied. He said, "I don't know, but the law's the law, and you're under arrest." They took my purse, told me to stand, and I did. The whole bus watched. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces. The pity, the fear, the relief that it wasn't them. When the night air hit my face, it was cold and sharp, and I thought, so this is what it feels like to cross a line you can't uncross. They drove me to the station. The smell of the police car was thick, leather, sweat, metal. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My heart was racing, but I made myself breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I'd learned long ago that panic never helps. At the jail, they fingerprinted me, took my picture, asked questions I didn't answer. The click of the camera sounded louder than it should have, as if it marked a beginning I couldn't yet see. Hours passed. I didn't cry. I thought about my husband, Raymond. How worried he'd be. I thought about the NAACP, where I worked quietly, filing complaints and collecting testimonies of injustice that nobody listened to. Maybe I thought tonight someone would have to listen. When they finally released me, it was after dark. I walked outside, and there he was, Raymond, standing under a flickering light, his eyes wet and fierce at the same time. He took my hand and didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The next morning, the news spread faster than fire on dry grass. Word of my arrest rippled through Montgomery's Black community, through churches, barbershops, kitchens, and schoolyards. By noon, leaflets were being printed. "Don't ride the bus," they said. "We are tired of being humiliated." At first, I didn't realize what was happening. I thought people would talk for a few days, and then life would go back to normal. But then Sunday came, and ministers began to speak from their pulpits. Monday morning, the buses were nearly empty. I'll never forget the sound of that quiet city. No bus engines, no chatter at the stops. Just footsteps. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of footsteps. People walking to work, to school, to the hospital, some walking miles, but all walking together. The boycott had begun. They called it the Montgomery bus boycott. I called it hope. I was called names, threatened, followed. There were days when I thought I'd lose my job, and I did. But something had changed in the air. People looked at one another differently, not with fear, but with pride. Even the children walked with their heads higher. Reporters came from everywhere. They asked why I didn't move, as if they couldn't believe it was about something so small. I didn't move, I told them, because I was tired of giving in. That line followed me for the rest of my life. Some people thought I'd planned it all, that it was some great act of strategy. But it wasn't. It was human, simple, necessary. Weeks passed. The boycott grew stronger. Churches organized carpools. Strangers shared rides. Mechanics volunteered to fix cars for free. It became bigger than any one person, bigger than me. And somewhere in those days, a young minister began to rise. Martin Luther King Jr. His words carried the fire we all felt. He said we were not wrong. He said we were children of God, equal in dignity and deserving of justice. When I heard him speak, I realized that what had begun on that bus was no longer just my story. It was everyone's. Still, nights were hard. The phone rang with threats. I'd wake to see headlights outside our window, wonder if that was the night someone would throw a brick or worse. But even fear gets tired eventually. And courage becomes a habit. One day, I saw that same bus again, parked and empty. I walked past it without stopping, but for a moment, I glanced at that row of seats, the one where I had sat and said no. It looked so ordinary, just metal and leather. But to me, it was sacred ground. Months later, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional. The boycott ended after 381 days. When the first Black passengers sat in the front rows without being told to move, the air itself seemed to change, lighter, freer, alive. People called me the mother of the civil rights movement. I never thought of myself that way. I was just a woman who wanted to be treated with dignity, to sit down after a long day, the same as anyone else. But I've learned something. Small acts, done with quiet conviction, can shake the world. That night on the bus, I didn't know history was watching. I didn't know children I'd never meet would one day learn my name in their classrooms. All I knew was that I was tired of fear, and that sitting down was the only way left to stand up. When I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of that engine, feel the rough seat beneath my dress, see the driver's face as he told me to move. And I can still feel the calm that settled over me when I said, no. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was freedom, quiet, still unshakable. And once you taste freedom, even for a moment, you never forget how it feels.